All right, thanks everyone for joining us this morning. Greetings and salutations to everyone. A very warm welcome to NParks' second Human-Wildlife Encounters webinar. Thank you all for joining us on Zoom and on YouTube. My name is Nicholas and I'll be your host for this morning. Our efforts to enhance our natural spaces have brought people closer to nature and wildlife. So this is the second session of a series of webinars where we'll be covering the different wildlife species commonly encountered and the science-based approach in understanding their ecology and distribution as we promote responsible and positive human-wildlife coexistence. So last month, if you had the opportunity to join us, we had the dynamic duo of Dr. Adrian Liu and Mr. Hao Chun Bing Pingat Kepujian, giving us an overview of human-wildlife encounters, hosted by Serena Radio Voice Lin. Today's webinar is on the theme of long-tailed macaques in our city and nature. We'll be joined by my colleague and friend, Ms. Chanelle Lim from NParks Wildlife Management team, and Ms. Sabrina Jabbar from Jane Goodall Institute Singapore, or JGIS for short. Chanelle is actively involved in integrative management approaches to mitigate human-macaque interactions in Singapore. And Sabrina is a seasoned volunteer at JGIS who was key in initiating the Monkey Guards program. So this morning, they will share more about long-tailed macaques, their ethology and distribution, and the collective work done by the Long-tailed Macaque Working Group to promote human-wildlife coexistence in our city in nature. So after our presentation, we will also have a short Q&A session. If you do have any questions along the way for our Zoom participants, do send them to Kathleen Yap NParks as a private message using the Zoom chat, and we'll try to raise some of these questions during the Q&A. I hope you're excited to hear from the speakers as I am. So without further ado, let us hear from Chanelle and Sabrina, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Chanelle. Today I'll be just sharing this presentation and just sharing with you guys a little bit more on our long-tailed macaques in Singapore. And I'll take the first part, and after that, Sabrina will chip in with some of the information about the interactions between long-tailed macaques and people. So maybe just to start off, we just want to introduce the Long-tailed Macaque Working Group. And this is actually a working group that's made up of a lot of government agencies, NGOs, educational institutions, and members of public who all come together to see how we can discuss and come up with a multi-pronged approach to see how we can manage the human-macaque wildlife encounters here in Singapore. So you can see on the photo on the right, it's really made up of a whole group of people, dynamic people who actually are very passionate in trying to help the macaques as well as the humans here. Okay, so for today's agenda, I'll be running through just a quick introduction on the primates in general, followed by our own long-tailed macaques, both ecology as well as behavior. And Sabrina, she will actually take over to share a bit more on the facial expressions, their body language, and the different sort of encounters that people often face. And this also come in hand with the preventive measures that we can share with you guys on how to manage these encounters. And then finally, we'll also just conclude this session on how this sort of scientific integrated approach is being taken to manage macaques as a whole in Singapore. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so in general, for primates, they all have opposable thumbs, just like us humans, and they are very visual animals. They are very good visual foragers, and they also have trichromatic vision. This means that they can actually see color. They can differentiate different colors, for example, like red or blue and green. Okay, with the increased brain size, they're also rather very intelligent animals, and they'll live in complex social groups. So there is a certain hierarchy, there is a certain ranking system when it comes to these family groups of primates. In terms of is basically focusing on macaques only. Macaques are actually really widespread across the world. We have the rhesus macaque over here. They're actually the most widespread macaque in the world. And our own long-tailed macaque is actually the ranks number 2. Other macaques that we also have is the common ones, for example, the Japanese macaque. They like to go for spa. You have the bonnet macaque in India, Barbary macaques in Africa, and finally, the southern pigtail macaque in Thailand. These are guys that are really, really big, about maybe 2 to 3 times bigger than our own macaques. So what about our own macaques? Okay, so our macaques, our monkeys that you see here in Singapore, they're actually called the long-tailed macaque, or also commonly called the crab-eating macaque. Okay, they are one of the 3 non-human primates in living on our island. We have the nocturnal Sunda slow loris. I'm very lucky if you do get a chance to see them. We also have the Raffles-banded langur. This is actually one of the monkeys that are commonly found in the central part of the nature reserve, for example, Old Upper Thomson Road and the Upper Pierce area. Okay, the Raffles-banded langur is a rather shy animal, and it's actually about almost twice the size bigger than our commonly seen long-tailed macaque. So for long-tailed macaques, it's important to note that they are a native species. This means is that they were found way before inhabitants or developments came about. So they were the original, how to say, inhabitants in our little island. And they are actually an edge species. So this means to say that they actually prefer the forest fringes. So a lot of times that's why you see them very often, because they just prefer the edges of the forest as compared to being right deep inside the forest. Okay, moving on. In terms of the distribution and where these macaques have actually been seen, we have conducted research both in 2012 and 2014 to actually try to map out where these monkey troops are. And you can actually see that most of them are actually concentrated in the central core nature reserve at Bukit Timah, as well as central catchment. We have also a couple of troops living on the offshore islands, such as Pulau Ubin and even Sentosa at the bottom. Okay, so in terms of comparing with other countries, okay, so this research also does look into the population density. So focused here is actually the Singapore's long-tailed macaque population density. And you can see mostly they range from 20 to about 33 individuals per kilometer square. Okay, as you compare it to other countries, it's actually a lot higher. So for example, in Hong Kong, it's like 300 individuals per km square. In Bali, it's like over 1,000. So you can actually tell that in Singapore, the population is not as dense as one would think, especially when you compare it with other Southeast Asian countries. Okay, based on the latest research, there's actually about 1,003 individuals in Singapore, both on the mainland as well as the offshore islands. Usually the troop size ranges from about 15 to about 30 individuals, but you do get troop sizes that even starts from like a small, for example, pair. You can even go all the way up to 89 individuals in the group. Okay, for our long-tailed macaques, they are very adaptable animals. So you'll see them in our primary, in our secondary, even in the mangroves, and I think it's most commonly you do see them in our urban landscapes. All right, so in terms of morphology, I'm pretty sure most of you have seen our very old long-tailed macaque. Just a quick sharing on how to tell them apart. So how to tell whether it's a male or whether it's a female. So macaques actually have a sexual dimorphism, which means there is a difference between the males and the females. All right, the males are generally larger than the females, about 25% larger than the females. They're also a little bit more muscular. Okay, for females, they actually have peripheral hair around their faces, kind of like a beard or like a mane. So for example, we can see this individual at the bottom left there, yeah, with the infant. Okay, she kind of has like a little mane coming out of her face, right? For infants, when they're actually just born, they actually have a black natal coat. But as they grow older, the black coat actually becomes brown. So a lot of times you do see the macaques, they're all brown, except for the infants that are black. Okay. All right, in terms of behavior, I mentioned earlier that macaques, they do live in very tight social groupings. Okay, they actually use a lot of their facial expressions and even vocalizations to communicate with each other in terms of the status in the troop. Okay, a lot of times they actually do a lot of grooming to make sure to maintain more social cohesion, and the group is just basically kind of like a bonding activity. Okay. In terms of the activity wise, they're actually mostly active in the mornings and late afternoons. Usually in the early afternoons, they will actually be kind of resting, playing, especially for the juveniles, while the adults are just taking a nap. So typical kid-like fashion, they'll just play around a lot of times. Okay, moving on. So I did share earlier that for macaque troops, they have a certain hierarchy. They actually have a dominance hierarchy. So there is an alpha, there's a beta, and then it just goes all the way down until you have the lowest ranking individual. Okay, for females, they actually stay in their own troop for their whole lives, and they actually inherit their rank. So this means is, for example, if I am a female macaque and I give birth to another female macaque, that particular female macaque baby will inherit my rank. So for females, it's a good life. For males, on the other hand, it's a little bit different. Because of this ranking system, they do leave around the time when they are sexually mature, and then they actually have to enter new groups. So normally the lowly ranked male individual will be kind of kicked out. They'll be outcasted until they have to find another group that will accept them. So that is actually one of the more common sightings that you do see around Singapore. These are actually our lone transient males. So sometimes you see them in all kinds of places, for example, the CBD area, places that you don't imagine monkeys to be around. It's actually mostly the lone transients moving to find a new patch of forest, moving to find a new group that will accept them. All right, in terms of their diet, because these are such adaptable animals, they're actually they are generalist, and they're also primarily frugivorous. So this actually means that they're actually quite important for our forest regeneration, is that because they are a seed dispersal agent. All right, but besides the fruits, they also eat a lot of young shoots, flowers. They even dig up roots and sometimes tubers. They even eat smaller vertebrates such as lizards, and they also love eggs. Okay, as mentioned, they have a forest fringe activity, which they really love moving along the edges. So you see them along the trails, you see them along the roads, along little fringes of the forest. That's where they usually forage for their food. Okay, in terms of an anthropogenic diet, meaning human food, they also, they can't resist. So as I mentioned, they have a highly adaptable feeding pattern, and they are able to actually supplement their diet with human food. So it's not so much that there is no natural food in the forest for them. There is plenty of food there, sufficient food for them. It's just that human food is just more tempting. It's more easily available, and they have a higher caloric content. So, for example, these macaques actually would spend less time foraging in an urban environment than actually foraging naturally. So it's just like, for example, an analogy that I can give is that it is easier for everyone here, to actually go and tapao food back home to eat versus going out to an actual restaurant to dine in, or actually trying to cook. So the effort it takes to go out and to cook your own food is a lot higher. So they rather just go and tap out their food. So same thing, how macaques also behave. Right? And a lot of these times when these human food or feeding happens, it does lead to a lot of habituation and more associative behaviors, where the macaques just get used to, okay, I can go to this house, right? I can go to this area for food, and they will just keep coming back. Okay, so as mentioned, feeding actually does change this behavior a lot. It alters their behavior to make them more positively associating people with food, with areas for food. So for example, for monkeys, they associate the road and with cars for food. And the thing is that not all cars will actually stop to give the monkeys the food. So you do get a lot of roadkills as well. So not only is feeding bad for the monkeys, but it also does have negative impacts on, like, for example, the interactions that people face with the macaques. Okay, so we've actually, under the Parks and Trees Act, together with the Wildlife Act, it is actually illegal to feed any wildlife across Singapore, both in our nature reserves, our nature parks, and even the public areas like your malls or gardens and things like that. Okay. All right, and now I'll just pass the time over to Sabrina, who will share a bit more on how to actually tell what the monkeys are saying, what do they mean in terms of their facial expressions and their body language. All right, Sabrina.
Okay, all right, thanks, Chanelle. So moving on, I'll be touching on about facial expression and body language. So because obviously macaques, they cannot speak, they have a diverse range of facial expression as well as body language to tell you how they are feeling. And it's actually very important for you to at least know a couple of them, because they can actually be a huge skill to avoid any unnecessary negative interaction, right? So typically, I think a lot of people have seen these photos everywhere, not just for the long-tailed macaques. When you see a monkey smiling, usually in today's age where, everybody flip out your phone and start to take a selfie and a Wi-Fi with a monkey, please don't do that. Essentially, when you see monkeys showing teeth like that, it's actually a fear grin. They are essentially fearful. Most likely, you are either standing too close to them, or moms with babies, and naturally they are protective of one another. Or it could be because you are doing certain things which are causing them, which are making them feel a bit threatened. Could be very big actions like taunting them. Okay, so they display the expression towards us. They also display this expression towards one another. So in this photo here, you can see the two adult males who are actually fighting for that alpha position. So the male that's actually displaying his grin, he actually lost the battle, hence the scars that we see. So the thing to note is when you see macaques squabbling, please do not interfere and let nature take its course. Right? Next slide. So there's a couple of things to note. As always, we always give this advice to a lot of wildlife, whether it's macaques, wild boars, the snakes. Always maintain 2 to 3 meter distance. If you feel like that distance is still too close to you, then just widen the distance as much as you can. Now, very important when you're walking on a pavement, don't walk through the troop, especially moms and babies, because if you think about it, we are essentially bigger than them. Try to walk around them, or try to take a different route if you can, or if you can, just wait for a while. And of course, please don't take selfie, don't intentionally smile back, although it might seem comical towards you, but in today's age, where you post a lot of things to social media and everybody starts to follow it, most of the time, the monkey will be at the losing end of it, okay? All right, the next expression will be lip smacking. So if you see the photo, and there's juvenile has his lips pucker up. So they will lip smack a couple of times, and it can be sometimes accompanied with affectionate cooing. So when they do this, it's actually just their way of communicating, all right? And just like us humans, macaque society, they do get into family squabbles as well. So how they reconcile is also by doing lip smacking. Okay. So if you see in this photo, the female is lip smacking towards this male. Lip smacking is also, if you observe it in a family, that's just how they associate their ranking. Usually the lower ranking ones, but they will lip smack towards the higher rank ones to acknowledge that they are being submissive. Now, important thing to note is when you see this kind of expression, don't imitate, especially towards the moms and the babies. It is very common, however, to see, like when you're walking through nature reserve or parks, you see like a group of the younger macaques is, on the railings, they look towards you and they start to lip smack towards you. It doesn't mean that they're trying to show affection towards you. It's most likely because they acknowledge that we are bigger than them, and then they are being submissive to us. Why I say don't imitate the expression, because you always have to remember where are the bigger one, the adults in the family, the alpha male. Because when the alpha male looks at you from the top, what you're doing towards his kids, he's not going to welcome that gesture, and most of the time, it will result in a negative interaction. Okay. Yeah. So raising eyebrow, the third expression, this is usually a telltale sign for you to know when a macaque is starting to get agitated or angry, right? So when you look at their face, they have this white coloration above their eyes. They will start to raise the eyebrow when they feel very threatened or alarmed. So if you see this photo, they similarly display towards one another, or of course towards you. Okay, so they do this body arching, and you start to see the hair standing up. So this is really a very first telltale sign to show that you should immediately widen your distance. All right. So very, very important, as always with a lot of animals, do not stare back at them. You bring it back to human context, like how gang fights happen, or you wouldn't like it if a stranger just stares back at you. So don't stare back at them. You can keep a glance at them every time you're moving off or widening your distance. An important thing to know is, I know that naturally when you feel like threatened, you will take a stick or an umbrella and you attempt to hit or taunt them. Now, this taunting action, you're actually giving them a reason to act in self-defense, all right? So later on, I will talk to you, I will explain how you can use stick and an umbrella to deter them without encouraging them to come forward, okay? So the last two parts are the common misconception. I always ask, how do you tell if the monkey is sleepy or the monkey is angry? So there are two different distinct yawns. So in this photo here, it's clearly shown that it is a sleepy yawn. So how to tell is the body language, they're very sluggish, their eyes most likely not fixed at you. And of course, you know, the bigger they are, when they yawn, the canines will be out. So when you see a sleepy monkey or a sleeping monkey, please there's no need to react at all. Don't take this as an opportunity to go near and take photos. And at all costs, still maintain that safe and respectable distance, okay? So the last one is the warning yawn. So this is like the final of expression that they will show you before they really want to touch you, okay? So this is, I would say, like a combination of movements, right? Now, because they're smaller than us, right? There's a need for them to do all these combination of movements to really send that message to you, okay? So what I mean by combination of movements is they start to do the yawn, they start to stare at you, they get very agitated, they scratch their arms, they scratch their neck, and I think a lot of you would have seen they might even climb the lamp post or the tree branch, and it's like jump. So they're actually trying to buy time. And then if you think about it, there is actually sufficient time for you to react accordingly, okay? So what you should do, a couple of things just to remember: immediately widen your distance, okay? Try your best not to taunt. So don't use a stick, don't throw anything at them. You're trying to make sure that you want to manage the situation as calmly as possible. Avoid running. Why I say this is not so much about like, because when you run, the monkey will chase you, but it's more for your own safety, okay? And when you are retreating, try to not immediately let your back face the animal, because you don't want to send that submissive message towards them. When you're retreating, look towards them, and then gradually the monkeys will gradually stop, okay? And then you move off as peacefully as you can. And as always, maintain 2 to 3 meter distance, right? I know it might be very hard to process this when you see a monkey showing this expression, but of course it takes practice, okay? Right. So that's done with facial expressions. So I'm going to run through some of the common human-macaque encounters that you will see. So we'll divide it into 3. So behaviors that you see in the forest and nature reserves and the parks, and then within the forest, parks and fringes, and then we move the last part towards the residential area. All right. So the first one, in the forest and nature reserves, Chanelle has mentioned, they live in a close-knit society. They're very protective of one another. You see behaviors like this very common, grooming and all. And also swimming. So, you know, like this is taken at lower piers. This is actually a great behavior to show that they're still very wild, very natural. They do this a lot. The kids love to swim, especially like on a very hot day. They use the long palm like a slide. So they repeat this process many times. They also do like to pick up on like apple snails or whatever that they can find. So this is actually helps to build that social bond between one another. All right. Right. So there's, as Chanelle mentioned, there's plenty of food, natural food for them in the forest. You might not see this often, but they do engage in coconut husking as well, very natural behaviors as well. And these are actually very important skills for the kids, okay? So because even though they can be found in the forest, they are ultimately fringe species. They will generally always explore areas outside nature reserves. And as you would know, we have more buildings, more human settlements right smack beside nature reserves. So there's an overlap between their ranging space and our ranging space. Hence, you will always have more, this increased interaction between us and them, right? So then we move on to forest fringes and parks. So this is one of the areas where your skills can come in handy. So this is a typical scene that you will see if you go to our parks. So this is along Old Upper Thompson Road. So, you know, usually people see this kind of scenarios. There are different kind of expressions that people have, okay? Some people might feel very fearful, they are worried, how do I walk past the through a macaque without causing any conflict? Some people just cruise by like expert, there's absolutely no need to react, while there are some people who know exactly what to do. So a couple of things to note, next slide. So a couple of things to note, like I've mentioned before, right? When you see macaques on your pathway, sometimes I like to tell people, you want to send that message to them that you're approaching. So you can clap your hands, right? You can clap your hands, or you can just shout, just to let them know that you're approaching, right? They will gradually move off. But in the event that they don't move off, right, you can wait for a while. Now, if let's say that you are alone and then there are other park users around, you can actually walk with them, okay? Because when you have more people entering that path, the macaques naturally will move away, okay? And if possible, try not to walk through the troop. Like I said, try to walk around them. If you have an alternative path, use the alternative path if you're not confident. Now, those who are walking dogs, make sure that you have your dogs leashed up. And what we have trained like residents who have pet dogs is they actually use their body as a shield, like a wall. So they walk in between the macaques and the dogs, all right? And then the smaller dogs, if they're not confident, they can just carry the dogs on their chest, okay? Some of the residents have also trained their dogs not to stare at the macaques when they see the macaques, right? A couple of things for you to just take note of, right? So as you would know, they associate plastic bags to food. They're very visual, so not just seeing colors, but also the sound of plastic bags, right? They're very, very quick to respond to it. So please try to swap to cotton bags. And if you're carrying cotton bags, try not to let it dangle on your hand when you're seeing macaques. Sling it onto your shoulder, hug it in onto your chest. If you're carrying backpacks, some of the backpacks have side pockets around them. Try to make sure that you don't have things that are at the side of the backpack. Because these creatures, as usual, they're very visual. You might be walking there once a week, but this macaques see people almost every day. So they know how to access food here and there, okay? So I will always suggest for you to sling everything up into your chest. So you want to create yourself in your whatever that you're carrying as one entity, and why up to your chest is because it makes it harder for the macaques to gain access to whatever that you're carrying, okay? And avoid eating in their presence. I would say like just don't eat in their presence for obvious reasons. And please do not feed. I know sometimes that when a macaque suddenly runs towards you, instinctively you just throw the food towards them. That is actually encouraging this behavior of association, all right? Do not litter, as mentioned, because you want to reduce association of food, unnatural food to them. Do stay on designated footpaths. You want to maintain that safe distance, respectable distance. Now, why I say stay vigilant and mindful is because I've seen so many people when they enter parks and reserves, they're so glued onto their phone or talking to one another that sometimes they're not even aware that the macaque is right beside them. And by the time that realization happens, the humans freak out, and then the macaques freak out, and that's where conflict happens, right? So always be mindful. The moment you step into a nature park or nature reserve, know that these are wild animals, you will encounter them. So you always want to make sure that there's buffer time for you and the animals to react accordingly. And I will keep saying this, maintain that 2 to 3 meter distance. Okay, so in this video, what I'm actually trying to show you is that sometimes you may not be even carrying any food source, okay? But then the macaque might come towards you. It's important for you to understand that because they have associated not just humans to food, but also things that we carry. And they're very curious creatures by nature, right? So in this video, what you see is actually I was carrying a raincoat, which is white in color. However, the sound that it makes when I hold it, it's like a plastic bag. That's why they approach it. So when you see things like that, right, the macaques finally approach you, right? Try to immediately store everything in your bag, right? So you can see that when I store it in my bag, the macaques simply move away. Okay, so you want to try to store it as much as you can because you don't want to gather the attention of the entire troop staring at you, because I wouldn't think that you would be happy to see that expression happening, that behavior happening. Okay, right. Okay, so one more video to show. Now, when you walk past a troop of macaques, I have this theory where it's like playing soccer. You know, it's like you're dribbling a ball away from your opponent. So you can see that it's done in a safe, gradual manner. I'm not staring at them. Through the side of my eye, I know where they are. I don't just walk all the time. I do pause sometimes. If let's say they are walking towards my path, I give them space. So you're kind of always playing around with this 2 to 3 meter distance. If a macaque starts to approach you, you stop, don't look at them. They will eventually lose interest, right? Now, some of the young macaques, they might like to test waters because they're just curious, right? So if you feel like one of them suddenly touch your shoe or your shoelace or anything, don't think of it like a Nat Geo moment and start to take your phone out and take photos, right? So you want to discourage this behavior. It is your responsibility to move back and move away, okay? So of course, what I'm showing to you might be easier said than done, but it takes practice. If you're not confident to do this on your own, you know, walk with bigger groups. That is essentially enough to deter the macaques. All right. So same thing when you're running or hiking past a troop of macaques, don't be glued to what you're doing. Always have a visual view of what's ahead so that you know how far away you should be running away or past the troop of macaques. If you want to take photos, you know, only do so when you're at a safe and comfortable distance. And always read their body language. If they are calm and just doing their stuff, it's fine to take. But if they feel like they're starting to get agitated, they start to give alarm calls and all, it's best to not do so. Okay, I've had a lot of questions where runners, when they are running in nature reserve, or even here, especially Mandai, right? They say that the macaques end up chasing them. It's not because, usually not because of food, unless you're holding food. But I've learned to see that sometimes it's the color that the runners are using. It could be the water bag that's red or that are striking in color, out of plain curiosity, right? And there's a very small percentage of unknown triggers why macaques suddenly want to swipe your leg. Right. So this is the last part, which I'm sure a lot of you want to know. Behavior, right? Those.
Sabrina, I think you can continue. Yeah.
Yeah. Next slide. Okay. So at residential areas, there are a couple of things where you can take note of. Now, we always say, you know, keep food outside, but how do you do that, right? Instead of just like storing it in your cabinet is one, but if you want to put it in a Tupperware, we would advise putting it in opaque Tupperware containers. You know, nowadays we have so many that has many colors and all. So you can put it in that so that it reduces that visual, that visuality from the macaques. Now, if you're not at home, obviously close the door, close your window. Now, sometimes when you're at home, but then like the macaques are like sitting on your balcony door, but then it is unable to gain access in, we would recommend for you, if you have curtains, to draw your curtains, right? You want to minimize the visual. Why I say it is because we have encountered a lot of residents where the macaques sit on the balcony door, balcony, and they don't have access in, but then they are viewing like a fruit basket at the kitchen area and all. So because they are creatures by forgot my line of thought anyway. Now, because they are very used to things that they see, they have a general map in their head. So when they wake up, they will continue to visit these areas and see whether they can gain food from it, right? So you want to reduce that encouragement for them to keep visiting your home. So just close up all these visuals as much as you can, okay? And like I said, very normal that when people freak out, trying to make them move away, they throw the food out and the macaque will leave, all right? But I think throughout my own experience, I've seen that there was a resident who gave chili padi to a macaque. The macaque ran off, and then the next day, like 4 more appeared in his balcony. So as you see, that is actually indirect feeding. And in terms of chili padi, yes, our long-tailed macaques have grown to love chilies, onions, and they love it. Okay, if you're growing fruits and all, try to harvest your fruits as much as you can, cover them. As you can see in the photo, these are examples. You can use like gunny sack cloth. So you try to make it as less visual as it can be. You can consider installing window mesh or screens. Now, that being said, right, when you install this mesh, it doesn't mean that you can leave your food out freely at home, all right? You still got to do your part, okay? Because it is no point putting all these barriers, but then there's still food access. Because all you need to do is one fine day, you forget to close your window, your door, and then they gain access, then the whole process has to repeat. Okay, using a bungee cord is a very cheap way for you. It goes a long way towards avoiding unnecessary conflict and association to food. So if you see in this video, right, this is actually an alpha male. His name is Eric. He's actually trying so hard to gain access, open the bin, right? This is through many years of trying. And you think that it is actually very, very hard. So it makes that job actually harder. And you can see that after a while he gave up, and it's actually painful because he has to keep holding against the force that keep pushing it up. And you need to think of it as a family, right? When the alpha male can't open it, right? The kids are all watching it, and then they see that, oh, if dad can't do it, most likely I can't. Of course, they all have individual personalities. They might try, but what I mean is this is actually a cheap way for you to consider. I've seen residents get very creative in how they tie up the bungee cords and all. Although it is an extra work to throw your trash, but it goes a long way towards unnecessary conflict and mess. Okay. All right. Okay, so this one I shall pass it back to Chanelle to cover.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina, for sharing all the information. I mean, for anybody who's interested to find out a bit more and have a bit of advisories or anything, you can actually visit the NParks website. You can scan the QR code. It's a link to the webpage. And these are actually a bunch of the collateral that we actually try to share with as many residents and the general public here in Singapore. Okay. And then I will just jump into how we can actually manage the macaques together. So as mentioned in the very first slide, we actually are all together in this in our Long-tailed Macaque Working Group. And both the working group as together and NParks, there is an integrated science-based approach that goes into it. And it's actually backed with research studies. So we are actually currently conducting a new population census just to have a more updated information on the numbers of macaques that we have here in Singapore. This also includes both the forest habitat monitoring as well as assessing the environment for any changes. We do a lot of collaboration. So for example, with the National Environment Agencies, we actually help to ask them, can you maybe change certain bins to monkey-proof bins So for example, these are the bins at a bus stop. In the monkeys, because it's open, it's easy to access. The monkeys just go in there and, kind of raid it. So we actually do work with them to see how we can change these bins and make it more covered, make it less attractive for these macaques. Okay, there's also monkey guarding, which Sabrina will touch on in the next slide. And then as well as outreach and engagement activities that we also go out to try to educate people who basically the general public. Okay, so yeah, Sabrina, we can just jump in on the monkey guarding portion.
Okay, so just bear in mind that what I'm covering here is not a training for you guys, because monkey guarding is a component on its own that the working group as a whole provides training for. But just a little bit that I will run through it. It was initiated somewhere in 2013 or 14 when I was with Acres. We actually did a pilot around the houses bordering Bukit Timah Nature Reserve. And then we moved on towards Dairy Farm Estate, where we started to move the training to residents there. And so right now it is an approach that we adopt, one of the approach, a modern approach that we adopt towards mitigating human-macaque conflict areas, right? So what is monkey guarding? Essentially, monkey guarding is trying to guide and deter the macaque safely back home or to a natural green space. And we are using ourselves as a barrier, visual barrier between people and monkeys. The aim is not targeted to eliminate sightings of macaques because it's near impossible. And monkey guarding is not one size fits all because every location is different. Every monkeys are different. They all have different habits. And even the tolerance level of people are also different. So I would say it's actually an integrated approach that comes in along with like what Chanelle said, outreach efforts and all. Okay, so in the next video, is just a bit of a gist of what this whole monkey guarding is about, right?
All right, thank you, Sabrina, for sharing the very informative video about monkey guarding. So maybe just to round it off. Okay, rounding off. Okay, so like I mentioned, we do together with the Long-tailed Macaque Working Group, we do a lot of outreach as well as engagement sessions. This can either be in the form of going out to the residents to actually do social surveys just to find out a bit more on how they are feeling towards the macaques. We also do road shows and pop-up booths for residential estates, or even in the general community. This also involves training sessions, especially monkey guarding training sessions for companies or for other places as well. Okay, and if let's say anybody needs any assistance or more information, or any queries, you can actually contact the NParks Animal Response Hotline at that number, as well as the ACRES hotline, and we'll be very happy to help out and see what we can do to manage macaques together. Okay, so yeah, that's actually the end of our talk. Thanks everyone for actually listening. I think now we can take some questions. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Chanelle and Sabrina, for that in-depth talk and discussion about the science-based approach towards macaque management and how we can work towards human-wildlife coexistence in our city in nature. Personally, I particularly appreciated learning about how macaques are actually very similar to us in their troop dynamics, expressive abilities and intelligence, as well as some practical ways to live in harmony with them as individuals who interact with them. So now it's time for our question and answer session. Thank you everyone in the audience here on Zoom today who submitted the questions. We've actually had quite an overwhelming response, so I apologize in advance if we are not able to cover every single question. Let's get on with it. So the first question is, what can I do when the macaque, or maybe a macaque, enters my garden or kitchen area to look for food? So maybe I'll ask Sabrina to give the first response.
Yeah. Okay. So usually, what I would advise, or what ACRES would advise, or NParks would advise, is when the macaque enter your place, if let's say it's in your garden, right, and you happen to have like pressure hose, water hose with you, you can actually spray in the direction of the macaque, not directly at them. You don't want to make them angry, all right? That's a way to actually deter them off, all right? Now, if let's say they gain access into your house, into your kitchen area, my advice is actually to open all your windows, all your doors, because when the macaque is found inside and then you panic, and then the macaque panic, you have monkey and people running around in the house, and then because the monkey gets frazzled, monkey forgets where the monkey comes in from. So you want to give as many options as you can to let the monkey out, right? If you have your pots and pans, you can bang against it. This loud noise emits negative reinforcement towards them, right? Things not to do is don't throw food in response that they will run away. Now, if you have a stick or an umbrella, you can use it, but it is very important that you don't use it in a way that you're like taunting them. You can tap it on the ground, or use the size and your body height. You stand up tall and just wave it in the air, and you can just shout at them, right? Or you can tap it against the wall or something, or just point towards them. Okay, but at all costs, if you're not confident to do it, don't do it. Okay, so these are some of the ways that we would advise. Yeah.
Thanks, Sabrina. Maybe I'll ask Chanelle if you have anything else to add to this.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think maybe just to add and just emphasize, I mean, because these macaques, they are very visual animals. So for example, your windows or blinds or curtains, they can be closed until the macaques have actually left or they have moved past your compound. Good to keep food out of sight from the tabletops, especially things that they are able to gain very easy access to. And I think as Sabrina mentioned, if they're in your garden and you don't really want them to be in your garden, you can try to spray a water hose. Use a water hose to spray water at the macaques. Yeah, I think that's all.
All right, maybe move on to the next question. All right, so how do we strike a balance between macaque protection and conservation and managing nuisance experienced by humans? Would increasing the penalties for feeding wildlife help? Maybe I'll ask Chanelle to answer this first.
Okay, I think I'll just break it down into the two answers lah. So the first part on how do we strike a balance between macaque protection and conservation and managing nuisance. Like I mentioned, there's actually a science-based approach that actually involves conducting both research into the habitat as well as research into wildlife. So this may involve environmental impact assessments and prior to development, for example. It could also involve habitat enhancement as well as connectivity for the macaques. And it's also important to actually understand the macaque distribution and their behavior, their diet, and what kind of activity patterns they actually do have. So besides the habitat, the macaque part, I think the human side is also important. So we actually do engage new as well as existing residents living near these nature areas and to raise more awareness on what to do during encounters with wildlife, as shared with all the various preventive measures in the talk. Okay, the second part, would increasing the penalties of feeding wildlife health. So actually with effect from June of last year, the Wildlife Act was actually amended to actually catch anybody who is actually feeding wildlife. This includes macaques all the way to birds, and they actually can be liable to a fine of up to about $10,000. Okay, so this penalty was actually increased and in place, and this ban not only just confines it to the nature reserves, but also includes public areas. So we did extend that to other parts of Singapore in that sense. Okay, so apart from that, there is regular enforcement patrols and surveillance, and we do also use technology such as, for example, CCTV cameras to monitor and detect any feeding activity. Okay, so it's important that this feeding of macaques and wildlife is controlled, because it is important in maintaining the population of the macaques here in Singapore. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Chanelle. Maybe move to the next question. So yeah, management methods for human-macaque interaction similar across different countries, or are there certain country or location specific measures? Maybe Sabrina, with your experience in research, would you like to respond to this question?
Yeah. Okay, so I can use Hong Kong as an example. So for Hong Kong, they do sterilize the macaques there, but that is also because they do have an overpopulation of macaques, hence the need to sterilize. But we also need to understand that, when it comes to wildlife in general, there's no one size fits all. So even though we need to also know that with sterilization, it doesn't necessarily reduce human-macaque conflict, because so long as there's food provisioning and easy access to food, there will always be conflict. So I think that is one good example that we can learn from. Yeah.
Thanks, Sabrina. Maybe move to the next question. So yeah, is there a need to limit the population of macaques in Singapore? Maybe I'll ask Chanelle.
Okay, so to answer that question, actually it's good to first understand whether, like, number one, just to check the population of macaques in Singapore first. So as mentioned earlier, actually we are conducting an updated research census, because the previous one was like in 2013, so it's quite long ago. So this census will actually help to study the numbers, check the population, and observe if there are any trends, be it decreasing or increasing population, or even stable population in Singapore. Okay, I think just to reiterate, I think part of the solution really is that we're trying to, in terms of limiting or controlling the population, will also be controlling people feeding the macaques, because feeding on macaques will only increase the population to basically increase their population, because for macaques, the more human food they get, they actually will be able to spend less time in the forest, able to spend less time in their natural behavior, and more time doing other things like procreating or reproducing, basically. So that's why feeding, especially human food, is actually very important in ensuring that there's no overpopulation or any escalation of the human-wildlife conflict. Yeah.
Thank you, Chanelle. We'll move to the next question then. So yeah, is the preference for macaques to stay in forest fringes a learned behavior arising from people feeding them, or is it a natural behavior of theirs? Maybe Sabrina, would you like to respond to this?
Good question. I would say it's a combination of both because, as mentioned, they naturally live on the edge of the forest. But of course, with people feeding and driving around and tossing food, this behavior has become more prominent in a sense that they will spend more time on the forest fringes, waiting and hoping for food. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Sabrina. Let's go to the next question. So yeah, are there any volunteering opportunities to educate the public on human-wildlife coexistence? Maybe Sabrina, how about you? Let us know on any of those that you know from your time in ACRES or even now in JGIS as well.
Yeah, definitely a lot. Bearing in mind COVID restrictions now, from the JGIS part, you can join us to be a monkey guard. We do have a monkey guard program where you can join us, you can be trained, and you can be repurposed to these areas where we need this effort. If your strength is in, presenting and talking and doing outreach, you can reach out to us as well. If you do have great graphic or art skills, do reach out to us. We always do need new collaterals in terms of putting down all these advices that we want to go in hand. Let's go on. So we do have Roots and Shoots program. So if you're a teacher, you're a student in your school, you want to be involved in a project, say like adopt a monkey in your neighborhood, do reach out to us. For ACRES point of view, since I am at ACRES, you can also reach out to them. You can help them with their education and outreach aspect as well. Ultimately, wherever that you reach out for help, you're ultimately going to be helping the macaques and the people because we are all together in this one working group. Okay. Good.
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina. Maybe Chanelle, would you like to share some of the opportunities in NParks?
Okay, so for NParks, every year the NParks actually organizes a festival of biodiversity that actually aims to create awareness and foster a sense of appreciation for actually Singapore's both flora as well as fauna. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we hope to start that up again. For NParks, there's also a youth program. It's actually the Youth Stewards for Nature program. It's actually a 6-month-long program where actually youths can actually partner with NParks staff to gain experience in both biodiversity conservation as well as human-wildlife interactions. So this is a pretty new program. So we hope to continue that maybe next year or the subsequent runs in the future. Yeah, so for any other, if you'd like to find out more information on any of these activities from both NParks, JGIS, and ACRES, you can always visit our website. Yeah, and feel free to share any of these tips that we have shared with you all to your family, your neighbors, your friends, anybody. Yeah, thanks so much again for joining us.
All right, I think that should be the last. Yes, it is the last question. So thank you again, Chanelle and Sabrina, for this taking your time to just help us to learn more about macaques and how we ought to interact with them to exist in harmony with them, in fact. And a big thank you to our audience on Zoom and on YouTube for joining us today. So our next webinar will be in June this year, on the 19th of June, in fact, and it will be on wild boars. So do keep a lookout for the sign up link on our NParks events page. Thank you all for attending this session this morning and have a great day ahead. Take care. Stay safe.